Morning, everyone. Welcome to the 9th day of HSMA training. Today we're going to be going through some more QGIS. We're going to be going through some mapping in Python, both static sort of flat maps and interactive maps, and also starting to work a little bit with travel time data. So hope you're looking forward to it. A couple of housekeeping bits to begin with. First of all, I do apologise. I've got a cold, so if I do sound a bit stuffy or if I have to turn my camera off to sort of blow my nose and the like, then that will happen potentially every so often. But we're going to try and power through and just see how we get on. So the other thing to note as well is that we are using a new environment today. We're using the geographic environment, which is available in the 3B repository. Now, I know that there might still be a little bit of uncertainty about environments, so I am going to spend a little bit of time before we kick off with the Python session, just reminding you how to get to the repositories, how to download the full repository. That'll be quite important today because we'll be using some external files as well, so the structure of them on your computer is quite important, and also just how to set up an environment from within an Anaconda. If we do have problems around that, there are backups for everything. There are online backups, so don't panic. You will be able to do the exercises unless you don't have QGIS, in which case you won't be able to do those first two exercises in this morning's session. But final bit of housekeeping as well is just a quick note about the revision sessions for this for the geographic module. We're going to try something a little bit different this time. We just want to really make sure that we're maximizing the opportunity for people to ask questions. We're not sure that the kind of current structure of the revision sessions is quite as useful as they could be. So we're going to be trialing out having a few shorter sessions, drop-ins scattered across a few days, where we're really going to be coming with no plan, effectively. We're going to be coming with a view to you shaping what those sessions look like based on what you specifically are struggling with. There'll be lots of live coding in response to that. There'll be me bringing up bits of the relevant slides to go back through and re-explain things, but I won't be going through as I have been so far and just kind of going back over everything. So I'll be sending out some updates about the times of those in the coming weeks. By the end of tomorrow, actually, at the very latest. So right, all of that said now, let's kick off with the session. So, Choropleths. Last week in QGIS, we looked a lot at getting point data into our maps. Today, we want to go onto the other side of choropleths. So maps a little bit like this. We've got boundaries, we've got colors. So choropleth is basically, you've got some sort of aggregate count based on your boundaries, whether that's per postcode, per lower layer super output area, per ambulance trust, whatever layer or whatever level of boundary you want. Now, choropleths are a great way to show this kind of thing. The colors can correspond to some level of this. You can change, as we're going to discuss in a minute, what those levels will be, what your legend will show for the boundaries between each. What does dark red mean here? What does white mean here? They're very flexible. They're very powerful. So choropleths are something that QGIS is also extremely good at making. Now, if you want to follow along at this point, again, not obligatory, and if you get stuck, if you get lost somewhere along the way, I'd recommend just stopping and watching for the rest of this. There will be a chance to practice this in the next exercise shortly. But this time, we are going to import a vector layer. So if you want to open up QGIS, pop into your start menu, type in QGIS, find it on your desktop, whatever works for you. So unlike our point data where we had CSV files, it was a delimited text file. So we had those columns where we had, for example, here's my latitude, here's my longitude, here's my accident index when we were working with the Stats 19 data. Here's whether this row of data was an accident that occurred in daylight. So unlike that, this time we're going to be using what's called a vector layer. Now, the vector layers that we work with can come in a range of formats. They can come in things called shape files. They can come in things called GeoJSONs. They can come in geo packages. You can, just to complicate things, you can get point data that is in one of these formats, but that's a little bit beside the point here. But effectively, we are going to have to go into a different part of the menu this time. So we are going to go into layer, add vector layer. So yeah, last week we were going down to this add delimited text layer. This time we're going to add vector layer. When you get to add vector layer, if you want to follow along at this point, within the 3B folder, an example code, there is a file called LSOA 2011 Southwest Forces Crime Figures .gpkg, so geopackage, that's short for in this case. When we click on, I think it's open or add or double click on it within this window, we'll be taken to this window. You'll notice this looks a little bit different to the window when we're adding in point data. This time, the lovely thing is we don't have to set the coordinate reference system. So what we can do instead is just click add. And I've just realized I haven't told you to open up your map from last week or add in a base map. So that may be something that you want to do first, but it won't matter so much in this particular instance. But we will be doing that within the main session. So, but for here, what matters is there's no geometry settings. We're not adding in or setting up a specific coordinate reference system. We don't have to do anything on this. We can just click add. You can see that where it says source vector datasets, that's where we chose the dataset. What you'll now see is a number of area boundaries. At the moment, they're all the same color, and this isn't a huge amount of use. So I've also just realized, I think actually I may have just told you the wrong thing here. When you load up this add layer setting, you will probably then see this, and you need to click on the 3 little dots to add in the vector datasets. Sorry, cold is not working well for my brain today, it would appear. So yeah, click on these 3 little dots. That will bring up this screen where you can choose the file that you want to load in, choose your geo package. So back to this, you'll now see a number of area boundaries. At the moment, they are all the same color. Not much use to anyone, so we need to do something about that. So when we were working with the data last week, a lot of what we were looking at had a certain number of categories per value. So for example, with this accident data set, we had things that, it was either the accident took place on a dry road, a wet road, an icy road, if the accident was fatal, severe, or slight. Here, the data set that we're loading in has a series of rows relating to the lower layer super output areas, so these boundaries. It also has the data about what those boundaries look like. So how it's all well and good having a code saying this is LSOA E0101, so on. That's not much good if you don't know what that actually looks like. What's the shape of that? Where is it located on the planet? Well, that's what these geo packages and GeoJSONs, all of that is contained within this particular file already for us. Now, in this case, the data has also been loaded in. We'll cover a little bit more how to combine a boundary file with no data with your data a little bit later on in this session. But for now, what matters is when you load it in, you'll have a load of data that is row by row, your lower layer super output areas. You can also look at the names of these. So instead of just having codes, there will be something like Bath and North Somerset 1, Bath and North Somerset 2. They're not particularly descriptive names most of the time, but they do have names. What really matters is these counts. So I haven't really expanded out these column names very much, but what it is effectively, for example, this one is criminal damage or something like that. So in this LSOA, we've had 181 counts of criminal damage. In this LSOA, we've had a 1,476 counts of antisocial behaviour, and so on and so forth. So what we want to do, we don't want a single category like we were doing last week per, we don't want a category per one of those numbers. Our map is going to be an absolute nightmare. It's not going to be clear at all what's going on if it tries to do a completely random sequence of colours for that. And also, if we want to start doing what we were doing last week, like turning on and off little categories, subcategories, so we can start to explore our data a bit more. Again, absolutely no use to us whatsoever. So what we want instead of choosing this categorized is to choose graduated. What this means is QGIS will nicely auto group our stuff together rather than having a separate category per value. Like before as well, we need to be choosing the value we want to color our areas by. So in this particular data set, we've actually got quite a lot to choose from. We're going to, in this example, I'm going to be looking at shoplifting. So what I mean here is when we're in this layer styling panel, this should be over on the right-hand side of your screen if you were with us last week and went through the settings to actually get all the panels showing up as expected. The what you want to click on is this little drop down next to value. If that drop down arrow isn't there, you probably just need to click on the edge of this panel here and expand it a little further over to the left. It does get cut off sometimes at the default size. But yeah, click on this down arrow and you will get a full list of all the columns within your data set which may have a value in that you want to display on your map. So the categories have been set up for us in this case. If they haven't been set up automatically, then you need to click this classify button. But what we have is a set of automatic categories that have been created. Now, in this case, we've got what are called quantiles. There are an equal number of points within each one of these categories. So we've basically gone through, chopped up our data set and gone, right, the lowest quarter, I'm giving you this color boundary. The next quarter, I'm giving you these, I'm putting you in this boundary. The next quarter, this boundary, and the kind of highest quarter in this boundary. So what we find is that looking at our categories, we've got 0 to 0, which seems like a really odd category. We've got 0 to 1. We've then got 1 to 4, 4 to 25, and then in our final category, we've got 25 to 1,723. So all of our high points of data are within this one category. It is spanning an absolutely huge range. And someone that just popped in, that's seen in the comments, a couple of people saying when they change to graduate, their map disappears. Yep, if you click classify, as Helen said, if you click classify down here, then it should reappear and it should automatically choose a classification system. And I'm just going to go through now how to get the classification to change effectively. So we can change the number of categories. So you can see down here where it says classes, we've got two little arrows. We can change it to more classes. In this case, in our little sort of indicator of what classes we've got here, the number of classes have changed, but now we've still got this really odd problem of having some, these very low values, 0 to 0, 0 to 0, etc., for quite a few categories with a slightly changing color pattern the whole way through. Not ideal. In some cases, quantile is absolutely going to be the right choice. It really depends on your data set. So you will experiment with the mode in a second. But in this case, we've played around with the categories, doesn't seem to, or the number of categories doesn't really seem to have helped us. What we can instead do then is choose this mode drop down and we can change the classification mode. What this does is adjust the algorithm that QGIS is using to work out the size of each category and where the boundary between each should be. There's quite a few options to choose from. In this case, we're going to try equal interval. And what this has done is we said we still want 5 classes in this case, but we want the gaps in each category to be exactly the same. So this time we've got 0 to 344, 344, 689. Again, they're not the prettiest categories, that's a different option. But what matters is that now they are a little bit more regular. You can see this is kind of given us a different problem with this map now, that actually nearly everything is falling within this effectively 0 to 345 category. There's so few values that are higher than that we're really not seeing much. So the quantiles, the equal intervals giving us quite different categories, but we can continue to play around, choose some of these other options, try looking at what fixed interval gives, try looking at what natural breaks, the Jenks one does this, tries to use a clever algorithm to work out sensible breaks. Just play around and see what makes sense for your data. Like with the categorized point data that we did last week, where we had those, your severe slight fatal accidents, for example, you can untick a category so that you just return you just keep the LSOAs that have got that fall within one of these particular categories. So you can see we've got a handful of points or a handful of areas down here, got one area up here, we've got a few areas in Avon and Somerset where we've got this higher sort of number of incidents occurring in this category, the shoplifting. We can also change the color map. So when you are in your graduated symbol, you can see you've got this color ramp setting. If you click on the arrow by it, what you'll get is this drop down. So this arrow here, you will get this drop down giving you an option to choose, blues, grays, magenta, etc. A lot of these categories, a lot of these color maps are chosen because, well, they work well, they have some sort of property, whether that's they're good for color blindness, whether they remain sort of consistently the same sort of hue and saturation as they go through the color panels. But just try out what works for you. All of these ones are provided within QGIS, should have some they should be a good starting point. You can also click directly, so instead of clicking on this arrow, if you actually click on the colors instead, the gradient color bar here, you'll get a dialog box with some more options. You can play around with a combination of color schemes. You can change, as I say, the number of categories, the categorization mode, to start working out how you can tell the best story with your data within your map. So if you now go to histogram, so we've got this class, we were in the classes panel, and you can see here in the classes panel, if you go to histogram and click load values up at the top here, you will see the distribution of the values in the column that you're visualizing. And these vertical lines here will show the boundaries that your classification has created. Sometimes this is really helpful. Other times, for no apparent reason, the distribution is so small. I think this is probably something to do with the large number of zero values we've got here, which aren't quite showing up. There is, I could promise you, a histogram just in this tiny corner here, but it's a useful panel to know it exists. This can help you sort of understand as you play around with the different classifications what is going on. So if we're working with the same map as last week, we may need to reorder our layers because we've now added in this choropleth layer. It's opaque and it's covered up everything below it. So you can see that it's covered up, in my case, this base map, but also it may cover up things like our headquarters. So I don't know if this will show because I have a feeling I didn't optimize for video, but effectively in your layer panel, where you've got this list of layers in the bottom left, if you have a layer like headquarters, you may need to click on it and hold down and then drag it above the layer that we've just created, which in this case is LSOA 2011 Southwest Forces, so on and so forth. I will try playing the video, but it may not show up very clearly, maybe a little bit juddery. So you can hopefully see, if that's worked, that actually what we've done there is we've clicked on headquarters. It's come up like this. We can now drag it around, drop it in above, and it will reorder. When it reorders, our headquarter icons, etc., will be displaying above our choropleth layer. So you can use these different techniques to actually help tell interesting stories with your data, but you always need to be thinking about what might explain the patterns you're seeing. So in this case, we've got vehicle crime. It might be that these are more rural areas, and actually vehicle crime is maybe more common out there. It may just be that some of these areas actually look really big. So as we talked about last week, lower layer super output areas, they are not necessarily geographically the same size. They can vary quite a lot. They are based on the number of households, the number of population within each of them, and they're not even completely consistent within that measure. So just think about what else might be explaining what's going on. Is it actually an interesting area, or could there be something else that's happening? We'll talk a little bit more about how to deal with that later. So we are going to work with a data set that hasn't been standardized so far. So as I say, it could just be an artifact of population. You could have higher values. It may not be unusual as a rate given the number of people in an area. Just be careful with your interpretation. Don't read too much potentially into the maps you're creating right now. There are a few ways you can get out around this, and we will be using later in the next exercise data sets that's had some sort of standardization applied. So on to the first exercise. I'm going to pop you into your peer support groups. What I want you to do is either load up your maps from last week if you saved them. Otherwise, open up a fresh one. Go into the panel at the top left, and I think it says XYZ tiles, and choose OpenStreetMap. So we just want to get in your base map if you are doing that from scratch. Otherwise, like I say, load in last week's map. I'm going to try and create some more maps from the Stats 19 data set. If you go into data sets within the the repository, then you will see datasets exercise 1. There is a GeoJSON file called stats19 counts by MSOA. Remember, MSOA is middle layer super output area, bigger areas than lower layer super output areas, just to keep it a little bit more manageable today. You may find yourself working with either in the course of your work. All I want you to do is spend a little bit of time creating at least one choropleth from this file, but then try out some different color schemes, try out some different categorization modes, try filtering things, try hiding things, showing things. Remember, you can try out the filtering from last week, down to, filtering just to a different area. You can clear that filter and look at the whole country. Do whatever you want, just play around with what you can do with Choropleths within QGIS. So we'll very quickly remind you how to download the repositories. So I'm gonna bring over my Slack here. And remember, we have two channels. We have the Central Plaza. Central Plaza is kind of the one that we expect. We put things that may be partially of interest to the entire community. So not just you guys as the current cohort, but the alumni. But it is also where we will be putting the general session stuff. So here last week, I popped in the repositories. These will always come out about a week before. The links, if you click on the link and open up GitHub, what you will see here is this green code button. Just zoomed in a little bit there. So this green code button, if you click on this little arrow next to it, you get this drop down, you get download zip. Zip is just a nice way of downloading a large number of files all together that will then actually have the benefit of coming, when we unzip them, they will be in the same structure as they were. They'll have the same sort of subfolders, etc., that sort of configuration as when we first had those files, when the person that zipped them had them in their system. So I'm just going to save these somewhere in my folder. I'm going to call this HSMA demo. And I'm going to save this zip file. This is just downloading for me in Firefox. Once that's done, I'm going to navigate to where I just saved that. And if you right click, if this is all Windows, unfortunately, but hopefully somewhat similar if you're on the concepts are still fundamentally the same on Mac or Linux. You right click and choose extract all. You should have the option if you're on Windows 11 and probably even Windows 10 to extract this without having to install any additional software. I'm pretty sure that's been built into Windows for a while now. So right click and choose extract all. And what you'll see is it come up with a window like this, choose extract, it will just extract it to the same location. Just give that a moment. And what it will do, as soon as it's finished extracting, it will actually open up the resulting folder. I'm just going to close that. I'm going to delete the zip file because I don't need it anymore. And now I'm going to double click into here. And you can see that once we get a certain level in, we have these data sets, exercise 1, and we have the data that we need for this exercise. So this becomes really important a little bit later on when we're working on the actual Python notebook exercises, because it expects the data sets to be in this specific place in relation to them. I'll talk a bit more about that later. But that's just a quick reminder of how to get the data out of QGIS. I'm going to now stop sharing that, not out of QGIS, sorry, out of GitHub. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to open up the breakout rooms in a moment. But first, Dan, do we have any questions?
So I think there's one that's just come in. So there's a question that's just come in. Plus, I think Sid was having issues with everything being yellow, but I don't know if that's something you can help with, or whether you need to have a look. Oh, they've solved it, so that one's solved. So Amelia said, I keep getting an error message saying the path's too long. Ah, yes. So this is a common issue. So basically, Windows has a 255 character limit on the file paths, and depending on where you've stored that, you're with a longer file path in this repository, you may well exceed that. So I think most people have just gone and put it somewhere else nearer the root directory. But Sammy, did you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I think that would be my suggestion. I am going to try I'm going to try restructuring some of the repositories to try and avoid this further. I have tried to shorten some of the names since last week, but unfortunately that sounds like that's not been quite enough. The way it downloads from GitHub is a little bit unfortunate as well, with the number of layers of additional naming it does seem to like adding on, which is a little bit unhelpful sometimes. So you end up with a folder within a folder within a folder. We have to go several layers through. Yeah, the closer you can get, you want a short file path at the beginning. So if you can get it into just something like, rather than going see users, your full username, my documents, HSMA, module 3, HSMA module 3 session 1, and then unzipping it, try and get, as Dan says, as close to the root as possible. We know that's not necessarily always possible when you have restrictions on where you're allowed to save things. The other thing, I'm just thinking if I can suggest something to do. Where did I just save that? And why did I delete the zip file? Because that's going to make it hard to show what I wanted to show. There we go. Got the zip file back. So I think this might work. If you double click into the zip file instead of right clicking and choosing unzip or extract all, keep going until we get to this level. Highlight the whole lot. So just click and drag, right click and choose copy. And then go back to a different area. So somewhere like, in this case, I've just got C HSMA demo. And we don't have paste. Did I actually copy it? Oh, so I've just, instead of, I had to just click Control and V there rather than, I didn't seem to have the paste option, but Control and V on my keyboard. And you can see now that actually what it's done is it's pasted everything from within that zip file into this this level of the folder. So this will still work for the exercises. All the exercises care about is basically it needs to know that it will go out one level and into data sets. So as long as it still looks like this, you've got a folder for exercise and a folder for data sets that are at the same level as each other, that will be fine. But that may be another way to get around it. So I'll just quickly do that again, because I think I may have rushed through that slightly. Let me get my zip file back. Quickly delete this lot. So now that we're sure that this works, so double click into your zip file wherever you've downloaded it, click in again, so get past this level that's got license, readme, etc. You've got this lot here, click and drag the whole lot, or you can press Control and A on your keyboard to select it all at once, right click, choose copy. Then we're going to go back out to wherever we actually want to put this, right click, well, no right click, because for some reason that's still not working, just Control V. Control V is the paste shortcut, and this will then paste it into the folder that you were in, and hopefully that will get around because we haven't got those extra layer of folder names that could be causing problems. So I hope that's doing. Then Joshua has also found the same thing. Yeah, extract the next folder down in the archive. Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that's helped. I really like Rich's comment about everything being yellow being the Chris Martin error. Very good. So that looks like everything. Just to highlight as well, so Sid with the yellow map, Sid found that the solution there was to deselect features from all layers. So do watch out for that. I haven't had that issue myself. That might be a slightly different version of QGIS or something that has a slightly different default. Any other questions? How to reduce my histogram down to just my relevant data is stretching out to 400, but it only needs up to 81. Have you reclassified your data? So if you changed the column that you are looking at, it may be that you need to click classify again, so it won't automatically update those. I don't know why. Again, it may be something similar to what Sid found. You may need to find deselect features from all layers, and it may be looking at the counts across multiple different possible columns. And that might be why it's actually looking up to 400 rather than just up to the 81 that's the maximum in your column, Rich. So let me know if that solves it. If not, I will pop you into your breakout rooms and I can come around and have a look at that happening on some people's computers possibly, because that does sound like something slightly different to my own QGIS problems. So anything else before I open up breakout rooms? Fantastic. Right. Oh, we've got, is there a way to check the specific area filter to increase loading speed? I'm not sure about that. I will get back to you about that. I'll pop a message, possibly broadcast that out once I've got a solution to that one. Cool. Right. I will pop you in your breakout rooms, or I'll open up the breakout rooms and you'll have to pop yourselves into them this first time as usual. And we will regroup back here at 10:20, or a little bit earlier if I think you've all had quite enough of Choropleths. So see you shortly. Hey everyone. Sorry, just trying to get everything set back up. Zoom loves moving everything around. So I hope you had a bit of luck with making some Choropleths. I know there were a few issues across the rooms. One which I hadn't anticipated is that this data set is a little bit larger than quite a lot of computers were able to cope with, which is something I will try and resolve for next year. If anyone had some luck with filtering, so I also didn't make particularly clear that actually it was you don't have to filter this data set down to the same groups as you were using last week. It's a little bit more complex with this because of the way that the LSOAs are named and set up. So don't worry about filtering down to the specific area that we chose last week. But if anyone in the groups did have some luck with filtering, maybe do pop something in the class tannoy. Filtering down may make it load in a little bit faster. It's not trying to display quite as much at once. The other thing that is worth mentioning has completely just gone out of my head. If you had problems as well, just generally with, so if you loaded in your file from last week and found that actually things were really lagging, it may be, especially if you made a couple of copies, a couple of additional layers of the point data from last week, that actually, again, you were starting to build up to quite a large file. The point level data is quite big. So actually opening a brand new file and pulling in that base map, loading in the file into there, that may solve it. We did have a few oddities with the way things were behaving around that. But if you do have any other problems, do pop something. Well, if you haven't been able to resolve them within your groups, then do give me a shout in the next exercise. I'd just like to ask as well, actually, I know Zoom is meant to have a feature that says something like ask for help when you're in your groups. Then that would be, can anyone shout out and just let me know if that actually, if you've spotted that in the bars in the bar at the bottom when you are in your breakout rooms? Anyone know if that's there?
If nobody's noticed, Sammy, I'm happy to pop into a breakout. Oh, they're not open, are they? I was going to say.
No, no, I
Very
think it's I have a feeling as host and co-host, I don't think we can see it, unfortunately, when I've looked. So, but if that button is there, it should give a notification to me as the host of this meeting that someone needs help. So if you're having trouble in your group that you can't resolve, then do give me a shout via that setting if it does appear to actually be present. It should be, but a little bit difficult for Dan and I to check, unfortunately. So Tomac has just posted as well, actually, for the filtering, and that's what I was having trouble with. So if you want to go into, I will just bring up QGIS on my screen a second. So here, for example, this is the example data set that we're working with, the crime figures rather than the stats 19 collision data that you were working with. If I right click here and choose filter, and my filter screen is on my other screen, there we go. So if I go into LSOA, so LSOA 11 NM or NMW are basically name fields. If I click all, you can see a quick list of all of the LSOAs that exist in this. If I double click on LSOA 11 NM, then it will go into my filter query building window. I then want like, and I'm going to choose, let's say, so Cornwall. If we use this this percentage sign, that means just match anything within here. If I now test this, what I should see is, yeah, it's returned only 326 rows. If I click OK, now you can see that previously I had data all the way up to here. Now it's just down to Cornwall. So if there's one like that you want to choose, choose a county or an area that you are interested in. Doesn't, like I say, doesn't have to be the same one as last week. If you then want to get rid of that filter, you will just need to go back in, right click on the layer in the layers tab, click filter, click clear, and you can see it's now all come back up. So we can just go into LSO in name, choose all to see a list of all of the possible LSOAs, and you can scroll through and see the kind of general groupings of them. So yeah, that's one way that you can just reduce the data set down a little bit, might find it loads a little bit faster at that point. So I'm going to carry on and Jin has just posted a question saying my values don't appear on the right when selecting a field for filter. Yeah, as Tomek says, you need to click on the category and you need to choose either sample or all. Sample will just give you, as I say, a random sample of the categories that exist within, or the values that exist within that, and so on and so forth. Daniel has also posted a question about, did anyone manage to filter on multiple values? If anyone did have luck with managing to combine filtering, Cornwall and Dorset, for example. Daniel's trying it with brackets or different ways. So it looks like Heath may have had some luck with that. Heath, if you're able to pop something in the class Tanno with an example of that, that would be fantastic, because I think that's a question that will be a lot of people would like to see the solution to. So, right. With that said, let's do our last little bit of QGIS for the day. Then we're going to be joining the data files to the geometry. So what we want to do is, you'll probably find most of the time your data in your organization is not just sitting around nicely in a GeoPackage file waiting for you to use it. So what you need to be able to do is get in a file that has these boundaries, these area boundaries, like the LSOA, the MSOA, postcodes, postcode areas, whatever boundary you're interested in. In this case, there are some boundary files available in exercise 2, so datasets exercise 2. They can also be downloaded from the Office of National Statistics. I'll make sure that a link to that is posted later, or the government websites. There's all sorts of different places that you can find these boundary files. You'll find that there's variety. There's 2011 ones, 2021. I think those are the two main ones that you will see. The LSOA names and boundaries have changed slightly between those times. So if you are trying to match, say, your data set in your organization is still looking at the 2011 boundaries, and you're trying to match it up to a GeoPackage of 2021 boundaries, you might find that you have some odd bits of missing data because they just don't quite align anymore. But just worth noting whether it says 21 or 11 in the names. So what we'll do is we will load in those boundaries, which don't have any data associated with them. They just have, where does the boundary sit on a map of the world? What we'll then do is load in our text layers like before. So we'll load in a CSV file that just needs to have at least one column that says, this is my MSOA names or codes. You can match on either, it doesn't really matter, but you need a column that is consistent between the GeoPackage or GeoJSON that you're loading in with the boundaries and the file that you're loading in. So they will almost always, the ones that you load in from, like in our data set today, the geographic data will have a column that is something like MSOA 11 CD, MSOA 11 code, or LSOA 11 code. You just need something that is equivalent in your data set. It doesn't have to be named exactly the same thing. It just needs to be a code or a name for that identifies each LSOA, and then has a row saying, well, in this LSOA we had this many collisions in 5 years, or something like that. When you load in your CSV this time, previously we had something saying like, this is my longitude, this is my latitude. This time you are going to say no geometry. That's all that's different. So first you load in your shapefile exactly like we did in the previous exercise. You go into add layer, add vector layer, you just load that in, but all you'll find is it just shows you the boundaries. You can't do anything useful with it. You can't go into this drop down and choose your, what to visualize by, because there's no counts in there. When you then load in the CSV of counts, you say no geometry because there isn't yet. We're doing that in the next step. What you'll then do is you will go down to your geometry file. So the one that's loaded in, it will be something like MSOA 2011. They always seem to have, they're on version 3, version 4, version 5, but it will be something along the lines of this in your layer panel. You want to right click on it in the layer panel and choose properties. Then in the properties panel that shows up, you want to go down to joins, which is all the way on the left here, about halfway down. And then at the bottom of this screen that opens, you'll see it's blank. You want to click on this plus button that has appeared. What you'll then need to do is basically tell QGIS, this is what I want, this is what I'm joining to. So the join layer, so you've already loaded your CSV in at this point. I want to join my MSOA geographic data the JSON or the GeoJSON that we've loaded in, or the GeoPackage that we've loaded in. I want to join that to this CSV data that I have also loaded in. It's just existing as a layer, but it's got no way of visualizing it at the moment because it doesn't know where the geography is. You say the join field. So the join field is the name of the column within your GeoJSON data. If you click on the drop downs, you will see the list of possible columns, and then you have a target field. Very often this will have the same name depending on, these are just very standard names for these geographies. The target field is the one in the CSV data you're loading in, the actual kind of counts and the like. The join field is the one in the geographic data. Now, when you go back to your graduated, your layer styling panel and you choose graduated, when you click into the value dropdown, you will see the relevant counts from the data set that you've just been working with, or the data set that you've just loaded in. So you are able to load in any data that you find existing in your organization. Now, later on in the sessions, you might be going, well, I don't have counts by LSOA. I don't know how to manipulate something that's come out of my database into counts by LSOA. I've only got postcodes, etc. We'll talk a little bit about how we can move up and down between those different levels of geographic data. You may also have tables somewhere within your organization, depending on the role you're in, that actually allow you to do those joins automatically. You may already have a table that allows you to join from postcode or etc. up to LSOA and so on. But we'll talk about another couple of ways you can do that without relying on an existing table. So you can now select the relevant files. Final thing to talk about is print layouts. So actually there are quite a few ways you can export your map when you're done with it. On Windows, you can just use what's called the snipping tool. On Windows 10, you have to hold down the Windows key, Shift and S to actually bring up this snipping tool. What will happen then is you get an overlay and you can just take a little screen grab of the area you're interested in. On Windows 11, you can just get to this by just clicking the print screen key. What you can also do is move your map, zoom in, zoom out, adjust the extent to the bit you're interested in, then go Project, Import and Export, and you can choose to export that bit of the map to an image or to a PDF. Now, a lot of the time that won't be that useful unless you're using point data, because actually you don't have any reference to the legend, the scale, like in the Choropleths that we've just been working with. If you want to include a title, legends, or multiple maps on one page instead, you will need to create what's called a print layout. So you can have multiple print layouts per map. So when you go to Project a new print layout, it will give you an option to add a title for this and make it something descriptive. If you think you're going to be making lots of different maps, you might be that this is Torbay area gun crime. This might be another map for Colchester area antisocial behaviour, so that actually it's quite easy to start seeing what these different maps are going to be. And then if you update your data over time, then it's easy to go back to that exact map and just regenerate it, reprint it, etc. Now the print layout will open as actually a completely separate window within QGIS. First, you'll want to go to Add Map on the left. So these are your new panels that you'll be looking at, your new buttons. Kind of just go through, hover over them. It will come up and show you what each one of them is. Have a look, see what's available there. But this little sort of piece of paper one is Add Map. And what is key to do then is you will basically drag it onto the legend. So you will sort of, once you've clicked Add Map, you'll be able to click somewhere on this print layout, drag, and it will bring up a map area. You may also want to add a legend. So again, you'll click on legend within this drop down. Like before, you need to draw the legend onto the canvas. Now, when you've got the legend selected on the canvas, there's a couple of different buttons up the top here. So you've got your pan to be able to move the map. You've got your zoom to be able to zoom in and out on the map. You've also got this pointer to be able to select an element of the page that you've added. So as selecting the map you've just added, selecting the legend you've just added, make sure you've got the pointer selected, and then you want to click onto the legend on your canvas. When that happens, it will come up with some options to only show item inside linked maps. So this is just basically if you've got multiple layers, multiple legends, etc., then it will only show the relevant legend for what you've got on the screen at the time. You also may want to add labels or titles. So in this, you'll go through, again in our panel down the left here, you want the text icon. It's this tiny little T here. So you want to add the labels or titles. The contents have to be edited using the label box in the item properties section. So over here on the right-hand side, you'll see there's a little tab that says item properties. So it's very small in this screenshot. But just click around, have a bit of a play with how these print layouts work. They're not the most intuitive, I must say. I don't find them that intuitive myself. And hopefully this will serve as a great motivator for why Python maps are so fantastic and why we'll go on to those later. But it's really useful to know how you can do this within QGIS, because QGIS is a great tool worth persevering with. And there's lots of information on the internet about how to create the print layout of your dreams. So adjust the font size by clicking on the font box inside the appearance section of this as well. So you can see there's a little appearance drop down at the bottom of the print layout menu. You can choose font. Once you have one label, you can copy and paste that label, rather than if you open a brand new label, you'll find that you have to change the appearance again, change the font size, etc. I'd just recommend copying and pasting. It'll save you a lot of time. It doesn't seem to save those defaults across your print layout. So then we can start building up to a map that is showing multiple useful things at once. You can start to have a map that compares different areas and so on. If you're using the OpenStreetMap base map that comes with QGIS, you should really be providing a little bit of text that basically says here's the copyright notice for the OpenStreetMap. It is free and open source, that map, but it is licensed in such a way that you have to kind of basically say thanks to the people that put in all the hard work to create it. It's also quite good practice to acknowledge the software just by saying something like created within QGIS. So you can also start to add more and more to your map. You can add in tables, you can add images, maybe you want to add in the label of your organization. It's also worth noting that renaming the layers in the layer panel back in your main QGIS window, not the print layout window, that will start to tidy up your legend a bit. So it will make it a little bit easier. So we could change that to something nicer like LSOA space crime figures. Or, we can just, something that makes it a little bit more intuitive to see what is actually within this map, something a little bit nicer looking. But yeah, you can start to bring in all sorts of quite interesting bits of data to your map outputs. Then when you're in this layout, you can choose layout. So instead of project here, because remember we're in this new window that's appeared when we've gone into the print layouts, you'll choose layout. You'll go down and you'll see that there's options to export as an image. You can export as an SVG. You can export as a PDF. SVG, off the top of my head, I think that's a format that won't pixelate so badly. Images will be a sort of set size. If you expand them beyond that, they won't look so good. PDF, we all love a PDF. It's a great document to format to be sharing things in. So what we're going to do is we're going to have another 20 minutes and then we'll take a 10-minute break. So what we are now going to have a go at is basically importing one of these data sets. We've got a new CSV of data where I've standardized some of the values. So it's the number of collisions per square kilometre to sort of try and take account of some of those larger or smaller LSOAs. It's also the number of casualties per 1,000 occupants. So within the Stats 19 data, we have information on where the people actually, how many people live in each LSOA, and where the so on and so forth. So I've standardized it. Might not be the best standardization, to be honest. There's other ways we could look at doing this, but just so that actually we are looking at something that's a little bit standardized rather than just completely raw data, I've standardized it. There will also in the second exercise datasets folder be an MSOA file. Let me just get that open so that we can see what that looks like. There we go. So in datasets, exercise 2, we've got this MSOA boundaries file. So we want you to load that in, go remember layer, add layer, vector layer, get your MSOA boundaries in, then go layer, add delimited text layer, get this CSV file in. Then you need to go through that process of joining the two together and then have a play around, make another choropleth. And then I just want you to try and create a print layout. The ideal would be that you create two maps side by side. You might not get to that. We haven't got very long for this exercise, but just play around, try and get at least one map in there if you can into a print layout. But the main focus is just getting the hang of joining these data sets up. That's the most crucial thing to be able to do, I would say. If you create any great print layouts, please do share them in the chat. I will open up the breakout rooms. We'll take 20 minutes, so that will take us until and well, yeah, I'll open up the breakout rooms now. Let's go until effectively just about 11 o'clock, and then we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll regroup at 10 past 11. So I will pop that in the chat as well. Any questions actually, Dan, before I do that? I can't see anything too urgent.
No, I don't think there are any questions about any of that that popped up. There was stuff about the filtering from previously, but people had suggestions on that, but no, nothing's cropped up.
Fantastic. Cool. Right. I'll open up the rooms then and we'll see you shortly.